Have you ever sat in a darkened theater totally captivated by the raw emotion unfolding right in front of you on stage? I mean, for that fleeting moment, they aren't just actors reciting lines, right? They're real people living out these incredibly complex lives. Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the playwright's blueprint. We're going to explore the art, the hidden science, and the architectural magic it takes to craft a truly compelling one-act play from the ground up.
So let's start with a big question. What actually separates a one-act play from a traditional full-length production? Think about it. You've probably sat through one of those massive 3-hour Shakespeare epics, right? The ones with intermissions, sprawling subplots, and endless set changes. But maybe you've also seen a punchy, intense 20-minute performance in a local black box theater. It's kind of like comparing a massive multi-course feast to a highly concentrated double shot of espresso. Both pack a huge punch, but their structural DNA, their pacing, and what they demand from the writer are just completely different. Today, we're going to break down exactly how to brew that perfect espresso shot of theater. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll explore the magic of one-act plays. Then, we'll meet the architects of the stage. After that, we'll break down the 5 elements of drama. Fourth, we'll jump into the pre-writing process, and finally, we'll put it all into practice. All right, kicking things off with part 1, the magic of one-act plays. Quick, focused, and complete. So what are we talking about here? Basically, a one-act play is a short, totally self-contained theatrical piece, usually running somewhere between 10 and 40 minutes. But honestly, the ticking clock isn't the most defining feature. It's actually the immense creative constraint. You get a single plot, a single setting, and one overarching theme. And you know what? That constraint is an absolute blessing for a writer. It forces you to cut all the fluff. Every single line of dialogue, every pause, every movement has to aggressively push that one plot forward. There's literally zero room for side quests. It's a masterclass in efficiency, demanding a complete, emotionally resonant story without a single intermission for the audience to catch their breath. Just think about the sheer economy required to pull that off. 10 to 40 minutes, one plot, one act. Now compare that to a classic Shakespearean model with its 3 to 5 acts, intersecting subplots, and a sprawling cast of characters. In a full-length play, a writer can really take their time, you know? They can build the world slowly, introduce conflicts gradually, and let characters wander. But in a one-act, the curtain rises and boom, the characters are already in the pressure cooker. That's the real beauty of it, the potent concentration. It forces the playwright to distill human conflict down to its absolute purest form. You aren't giving the audience a panoramic view. You're handing them a microscope to examine one critical, life-altering moment. Moving right along to part 2, architects of the stage, building your world. You know, long before a single light is hung or an actor steps onto the stage, someone has to dream that whole world into existence, and that is the playwright. The playwright is quite literally the structural architect of the theater. Think about a master architect. They don't usually pour the concrete or hammer the nails themselves, right? Similarly, the playwright rarely acts in or directs the final piece. Instead, their job is to draw the intricate, infallible blueprint that makes the entire structure sound. They calculate the load-bearing walls of the narrative, so to speak, ensuring that when the actors step inside the story, it doesn't just collapse under the weight of its own emotion. And that painstakingly drafted blueprint? Well, that's the script. But remember, a script isn't just a story jotted down on paper. It's a highly functional, technical document. Sure, it contains the dialogue, the exact words the characters will say, but equally crucial are the stage directions. These are the vital instructions dictating physical movements, critical lighting cues, the layout of the room, and the underlying emotional tone of a scene. The script is the literal roadmap handed over to the director, the set designers, the lighting techs, and the actors. If that script is weak or structurally flawed, the whole production is going to crumble. Which brings us perfectly to part 3, the 5 elements of drama. This is our structural foundation. Let's look at how this builds, because every compelling dramatic arc, whether it's a sweeping 3-hour epic or a 10-minute short, relies on a very specific progression of tension. This is the heartbeat of your narrative. First up, the introduction. This is your hook. It reaches out, grabs the audience, and pulls them straight into your universe. Second, we establish the characters and setting. We have to instantly understand the normal world before we tear it all down, right? Third is the rising action. And this isn't just a random sequence of events. It's a series of escalating complications and failures that crank the tension tighter and tighter. Fourth is the climax, the explosive point of no return, the absolute peak conflict where the old world breaks. And finally, the denouement. That beautiful release of unbearable tension, the theatrical sigh of relief, where a new normal is established and our thematic questions are answered.
Let's actually see this in practice with D.M. Larson's short script, Touched by an Alien. Now, the initial premise sounds like a super breezy comedy, right? Space explorers and a cynical grunt chasing playful aliens across some bizarre landscape. Boom, characters and setting established in seconds. But watch how strictly it sticks to the structure. The rising action builds organically as the crew repeatedly fails to capture an alien. Then the climax hits, totally shifting the tone. An explorer is suddenly violently wounded. The tension peaks. But instead of a vicious attack, an alien unexpectedly shows deep compassion and heals the wound. That climax breaks the tension, leading right into a denouement that leaves the audience with a really profound theme about mutual respect between different groups. So you see, even a lighthearted, comedic 10-minute piece completely relies on these strict structural rules to deliver a real emotional punch.
All right, let's pivot to part 4, the pre-writing process. Planning before you pen. You know what the single most common paralyzing mistake new writers make is? It's sitting down, staring at a blank page, and just waiting for genius to strike. Professional pre-writing solves this by splitting the work into 2 totally distinct phases, and this brilliantly illustrates it. First, you have brainstorming. This is the expansive, chaotic, highly creative phase. You're basically just throwing paint at a canvas, generating raw concepts with zero judgment. But then you have to completely switch gears into phase 2, outlining. This is where the analytical mind takes over. You take that wild, messy creative output and ruthlessly organize it into a structured linear flow. You absolutely have to embrace both mindsets, and honestly, you need to do them in this exact order if you want to succeed.
So where do you even find that initial spark for the brainstorming phase? Well, a fantastic starting point is leaning on universal themes that have driven human drama for literally centuries. Think about the forms of love, romantic, fiercely familial, or even deeply toxic. Think about power and political will. Who has it, who desperately wants it, and what they'll do to keep it. Consider social class and struggles, that timeless friction between the haves and the have-nots. Or, hey, you can always rely on an absolute classic, revenge. Because let's be real, who doesn't love a good theatrical grudge? These universal concepts are incredible seeds that practically guarantee your story is going to tap into something deeply human. Okay, so once you pick a core seed, let's say social class, how do you practically grow it? You use a graphic organizer, like a concept map. You literally just write your chosen theme right in the center of a blank page. Then you use free association to branch out. Jot down every idea, feeling, specific image, or character type that pops into your head. The psychology here is key. Visual webbing bypasses your brain's inner editor. It lets your subconscious make strange, surprising connections that a rigid bulleted list just wouldn't allow. Maybe social class makes you think of a billionaire and a barista trapped in an elevator. Or maybe just the sound of worn-out work boots. Remember, there are absolutely no wrong answers at this stage. You are just mining for raw, dramatic gold. Now, when that concept map is completely overflowing with raw material, you switch to the outlining phase. This is where you fully embody the architect. You take that messy web of brilliant ideas, and you map them directly onto our 5-point structural foundation. What is the specific problem kicking off the narrative? Which brainstormed events will serve as the rising action? What is the singular, unavoidable climax? And how does the fallout lead into the resolution and conclusion? If you're a highly visual thinker, you can even sketch this out as a storyboard, plotting your beats like a comic strip. Doing this guarantees your narrative house has really good bones long before you ever type the words Scene 1. And that brings us to our final section, putting it into practice. Make it right! We've explored the theory, the structure, and the psychology. Now it's time to synthesize all of this into an actionable mission. If you're collaborating, get your group together and agree on just one overarching theme. Next, grab a massive piece of paper and build out that graphic organizer. Turn off your inner critic and gather your wildest, most vivid ideas. Finally, rein all that chaos in. Build a simple, robust 5-point outline or a visual storyboard that takes us flawlessly from the inciting problem all the way to the conclusion. If you follow these exact steps, you won't just have a vague idea, you'll have drafted your very first professional playwright's blueprint. So, what does this all mean for you? It means you now possess the exact same structural tools, the same understanding of constraints, and the same pre-writing frameworks that professional playwrights use to build incredibly captivating worlds on the stage. You know exactly how the architecture works. The only piece of the puzzle that's missing right now is your unique voice and your specific perspective on the human condition. So, I want you to take a good, long look at that blank page in front of you. Grab your pen. What world are you going to build today?